Oh, sorry. I had it disc grabbed by a really weird way. Get this out. Recorded. What do I even have here? I don't know. We have to open this. This is Just Because. Complete collection. Alright, I see an English dub. I see Region A only, 12 episodes on 2 discs. Sometimes everything in life doesn't go according to plan. Oh, jeez. It's this kind of depressing thought. The truth. Curiosity. Well, I don't know. That got depressing really quick. Toka Gettan, the Moonlight Lady returns. Which I don't think I had. Truth of the matter is I kind of had to be quick about choosing to get it, I think. But it's Sentai, and that's my worries. Even though I don't recognize the name or the art, doesn't necessarily mean I didn't already get this at some point. 2000 years, Carnation B. This is Japanese with English subtitles. Special features, Region AL, 26 episodes on 3 discs. This might not be a re-release, but it's hard to say. None of this is looking familiar, unfortunately. I know one of you complained about how I don't watch a lot of my actual Blu-rays anymore, and that's a fair criticism. You know, The Lost, or Deep Insanity, The Lost Child. Oh, different underneath the slipcover. Kind of cool looking. Sorry. Plastic on that side is getting a little... There we go. Deep in the Asylum. Interesting. Regions A and B. English dub. 12 episodes. Whoa! It's a good thing Blu-rays are... Yeah. Hi there. It's a good thing Blu-rays are a little more sturdy than old DVDs were. Especially didn't like the fact that this one landed on my right foot, specifically on the toenail. Because it didn't feel like it hit it in a way that would scratch, and it didn't look like there were any scratches, but maybe y'all saw differently. But yeah, anyways. Yeah. Next up we have Banished from the Heroes Party, so I decided to retire to the countryside. You know, the weird show that I wondered if it was going to be wanding, but then it went completely easy country life. Like, the idea that our main character is a secret badass is one that is... It's a Regions A and B, that's an English dub. Jam-packed for life in the country. Oh. This is the complete season. There wasn't an additional series. I'm trying to remember if it ended in a way where it was set up so there could be more to it. Who knew the quiet life would be so lively? But I think the point is, well, it gives hint as to the quiet life potentially being lively. It isn't that lively. As in, like, it stays relatively quiet and simple. Okay, so that was Blu-rays 1 and 2. This is DVD 1 and DVD 2. Okay. Now I'm vaguely remembering some of the stuff here. Maybe I should take a look to see if maybe there was another season that was going to come out or is coming out that I didn't know about. You can see some good artwork. Ooh, a comic in there. And this includes a fabric poster, chibi sticker sheet, and 6 art cards. I think that's everything. And let's take a look at the art cards first in case... Oh, the art cards are sealed. Interesting. She looked like a different character for some reason. First, we separate the plastic. Excuse me. There's 6 of these, so this one that feels like is 2 must actually be 2. Yeah, there we go. Some of these arts look familiar, but I think they look familiar from being used in the box set, and not from what I saw on the limited piece of cloth. Here's the chibi sticker set. Definitely a nice thing to have. I just don't know what I would want to put it on. Like, even if I chose something like my laptop, I feel like, here it is. Even if I chose like my laptop is old enough that it could potentially be replaced at some unknown point in the near future. Set that aside and take a look. Okay, actually, I think this was that one. Although, you may see there's a bit of a shiny sheen to this. It's pretty neat. Nothing on the back. Pretty neat. So I'm not sure how to best deal with these pure cloth things, because I'm used to them hanging from wall scrolls. I suspect you have the ability to attach them to wall scrolls, because it's not like wall scrolls that I currently get were manufactured out of nothingness. Maybe I saved this in here. Ooh, it does fit in there. Okay. Yeah, there we go. Well, here's this week's anime DVD collection update.
Alright, so I've been on PTO since Friday, I guess. So that means a little more time for myself. I'm trying to think how that's manifested. Right now, since it has been a full week, it's manifested in certain specific ways. But I guess I should just talk about all the anime I've watched. And it's interesting because my notes aren't in the order of what I watched them. They're just in the order of whatever they happen to be when I put them in there and stuff like that. So, for example, the first one on my list is Spy Family episode 24, which is the most recent Spy Family episode. And, you know, this was another one of those ones that kind of had 2 stories to it, but I would say they were both actually very heartwarming stories. I really liked them from a very sentimental perspective. Maybe the show is setting itself up to get closer to certain themes that are kind of important for the end of the show. I'm not exactly sure. I do know that it said there's an episode 25 coming up, so that makes me think 24 wasn't the last, so it's not a 12. I don't even remember how many were in the first core when that came out. But this one, I don't know if there's 1 or 2 more episodes left. Should be interesting to see. Next up, Beast Tamer episode 12. If someone had told me this was the last episode, I almost could have believed them. But there is it does sound like there's 1 more episode. So like episode 11 set up the big thing to happen in this episode. This episode wrapped that up, but maybe it didn't leave this show in a way where it's like, okay, and now we're ready for a break. It kind of felt a little off in that regard. So hopefully there's one more episode, but otherwise, I wouldn't say it's one that I'm looking the most forward to, because I think I've described that I seem to just have good momentum on this show, but I don't know that I feel like it has the direction that I would want. Like, I don't know that it has anything other than, here's our characters, and our main characters are kind of cool, but I don't think what they're doing moment to moment is the most well-defined, such that that alone can be what carries the show per se. I say per se because, obviously I'm still watching it, and I like the character designs, character ideas, and just some of the executions are a little bit okay-ish, I guess. Maybe not narratively the most grandiose thing, but not everything has to be, right? But it did leave me feeling like maybe it was setting up for a final episode, and that final episode may kind of tell us, where is it going to go after this big incident? Because I'm a little bit curious about that, because while it did give a little slice of some of that stuff, it didn't feel like a satisfying end of core or end of season or end of story sort of thing. So maybe there's just a little bit more to go there. Bakshi the Rock. I don't even know if I've been pronouncing it right. I should listen to the characters pronounce her name more. Bakshi. So the thing that surprised me about this episode is I kind of knew, okay, this is what they're setting up to happen at the big end of core, end of season, end of series, whatever is that big thing that's going to happen. They were definitely setting up the previous episode for that, and I kind of knew, okay, 11 episodes doesn't feel like it's intended to be an 11 episode series, so it's probably this episode is leading up to the last episode. And the thing that surprised me about it is I half expected it to leave on a cliffhanger ending where you're like, oh no, will the thing they're planning for actually happen or not? But instead it ends on a note of that thing's about to happen, which is good, because I kind of felt like as the episode went, I wanted to see that happen. I was going to be disappointed that the next episode wasn't already out, and that I would have to wait a week, maybe a little bit longer, because this coming weekend is Christmas weekend. I'll have to see. There's no demand on my part that these streaming services continue to subtitle and dub through the holidays. I'm not working through these holidays. Not everybody has to, right? And so for them, it was kind of, oh yeah. So for me, it was like, I wouldn't want to end on a cliffhanger other than I want to see this moment, because I want to see what happens. It's built up to this well enough that I'm kind of curious. So I'm looking forward to the next episode. And the next episode could be the last episode. I don't know. I don't really pay attention to how long these things are supposed to be. I really should, especially given how many times I'm on here talking about it. And because, obviously, since I'm not talking about what's on Blu-ray, I can tell you, oh yes, there's 12 episodes on this Blu-ray, and I can tell you, and I watched all 12, and I wouldn't expect any more to be out on Blu-ray. At that point, I'd be talking about things from, okay, this is where the release decided to stop. I wonder what's in the next section. But I'm watching more streaming stuff lately, because I just don't have to get up and shuffle things around. I get to keep up on things that they're currently airing, things that seem to be taking forever to come out on DVD, Blu-ray, etc. And I really should know these things more. But unfortunately, I don't. I can just tell you what it feels like being here at episode 11. It's like, it's not as stressful a cliffhanger as I was afraid it was going to be. I'm actually looking forward to the next episode, not even from a, how is this resolved? I just want to see what happens. Because I've enjoyed the show up to this point because of what it's done. So, looking forward to that. Chainsaw Man, episode 10. Obviously I'm watching the dub version, and subtitled people are a little bit ahead of me in this regard. Okay, yeah, that's what happened in this episode, and that was... I think it was the previous episode where I talked about how I was afraid how they did something that seemed like a status quo shakeup that happened as soon as they established anything in the anime resembling a status quo, which made me worried, because sometimes that's a sign that a show isn't very confident about its setup of a status quo. And then instead of creating a good status quo. It instead just has to throw twists at you. And then at that point, it's like, why am I going to continue watching this anime if I have to re-up my investment every single time in what's going on? And, you know, it worries me that there's a kind of a bad writing in there. But again, the next episode of it kind of showed why it wasn't that bad, and I thought this episode continued more of it. So it's kind of a flowing forward sort of thing. Yeah, I think this... It kind of feels similar to my complaints about Jobless Reincarnation, except that one... That one felt like kind of a natural, as your life progresses, sometimes what you're focusing on in the here and now changes over time. Whereas Chainsaw Man was just sudden and abrupt, and they both kind of have that same worry of, why can't they give me something that's like, here's a situation, can you enjoy it? And Jobless Reincarnation wasn't that bad in that regard. But it was just kind of a general feeling, and Chainsaw Man, I guess I was afraid it would be doing it really badly. But all good. I guess I'm curious. I don't remember what happened at the very end, but I do remember it was setting up that stuff. And it's a kind of an interesting idea. I'm kind of interested to see if they do anything interesting with it. But I hate speaking in the vagaries. Hopefully other people are listening to this and either nodding their head saying, oh yeah, that's what Giga's nodding at. Or they're like, oh, I was thinking of watching it. I wasn't quite sure. I was going to see how it turns out long run. Well, maybe I'll give it a shot. And... you know, yeah, I think you're free to take what I'm saying here in that regard anyway. To Your Eternity, Season 2, Episode 7. That one, I think, was a good continuation. I kind of was worried that the previous episode maybe left it in a state where, depending on what they do, it could feel stuck. And it wouldn't be a true stuck, but it would be stuck in a way that's, like, stuck with elements of the show that are maybe less interesting. But it... actually dealt with those in a way that are actually very entertaining while also not being stuck to those elements. So it's not stagnating as a story. It's still continuing to do cool things, and I am definitely curious what's going to happen next, because, you know, unlike these other episodes that I talked about, they're like, oh, I'm glad this didn't end on a cliffhanger. Well, this one ended on a cliffhanger, so I'm definitely interested in what the next episode... The previous one did too, which can be good. It means you have a reason to keep watching, and I think To Your Eternity is doing it a little bit better because going through turmoils does seem to be a major theme of this, so turmoils being the transition points between episodes seems fine as long as it's not too janky, and it hasn't felt too janky. It's felt like a bit of a flow. So it's been well. But, yeah, definitely want to see next week's episode, assuming it comes out. Again, holiday stuff. My Hero Academia, Season 6, Episode 122. Now, obviously, I'm going through dubbed and subtitle only. It's probably ahead of where I'm talking about here. But, Jesus, this is a good season. It's a good show. I've appreciated this show so much. And this one... yeah, so I wasn't quite sure if we were going to just watch this episode or we were not going to watch this episode and save up a chunk, because Season 6 has just been insanely... relevant. I mean, again, I highly appreciate the fact that usually at the start of a season for a series like this, you kind of expect it to do something that's like, oh, well, here's this side training you all have to do. But no, it started where it needed to be. And for this episode, it's continuing that stuff well. And for just a single episode, it's just like, oh, my appetite is still wet. This is still doing great stuff. Show, you are doing a good job. Good job, My Hero Academia. And I guess if we go the opposite direction, so, again, since I'm watching that with my Friday friend, I'm not watching ahead, so, like, I know episode 123 is already out. It looks like that comes out, new dubbed episodes are coming out on Saturdays, so that episode 123 has been out for half a week. No, not half a week, 3 days. And I'm not going to watch it until this coming Friday with my Friday friend as usual. But, you know, the one episode isn't everything we were going to watch. So at that point, I guess the decision was to have him start watching Rising of the Shield Hero Season 2, which, as you may recall, I did watch. And at the time, even though I'd watched a bigger chunk, I said there was something that felt off about it. And I feel that's the case here with season 2, rewatching it. And it really is that some important fundamental thread is not there, but the show's still moving forward the same as it had before, except that thread is no longer present. And that's a problem, because at least the first season supposedly finished that thread in a way that's maybe not complete, but complete enough that we don't give a rat's ass anymore. And they didn't continue it in any way here, and it would be hard for them to continue, except as I complained before, they eventually do continue that sort of thread. But at this point, it's like, it feels like it's not a natural flow. It feels a little artificial from a storytelling perspective, but you just take a step from back, and the real problem is it should be transitioning to a new flow, which is what was discovered in the later episodes of this first season, which are tangentially related just because our main character is the shield hero, and he's kind of got 2 story arcs that are intertwined going on. But with one of them unwound, you need to get the other one going complicated now that we're invested, I feel. And I don't feel like, not only do you not get that at the beginning of the second season, but again, I remember the way second season builds up, it doesn't feel real. Like maybe there's something wrong with the pacing, or maybe there's just something about this show where it was really only good for the beginning there. Maybe not good, sorry. It was only really great from the beginning there, and then after that it's maybe only good. Because it's not like the characters aren't neat, the ideas aren't neat, the explorations aren't neat, but it definitely doesn't have that same drive to watch that was present in the first season. And for the 3 episodes we watched, it definitely feels that way rewatching it. Oh well. Next up, I guess I finally started watching Jujutsu Kaisen. Not Jujutsu, Jujutsu. I'm looking at my notes there. Thank fucking God I got notes. I mean, I've been curious about it. I've seen advertisements and this and that, and just kind of curious. And sorry, I'm just trying to think what exactly I would want to say about it, because it's been very enjoyable so far. There's something off about it, but it's maybe not off in a way that would make me not want to watch it, and I guess trying to identify that maybe is important for other people who aren't watching it and are considering and want to get more of an opinion or thought from me. So, for example, I really like the main character. He's got a string of naivete to him, but at the same time, he's a pretty competent person, at least in these first 3 episodes. And he does some strange and unusual and unexpected things that are just like kind of satisfying to see done. So, he's a nice character, and it feels like the maybe shonen-y tropes that are present don't have as firm of a grasp on there. You can kind of feel them there, sort of massaging things to go a certain way, but it doesn't feel as heavy-handed as I was almost expecting it to be. Which, again, isn't to say that it's not there, but it's kind of like not overwhelming in its forcing a genre on you, I guess. Now, some of the other characters other than the main character, they don't strike me as bad, but they strike me as kind of, I don't know. Does this person have an attitude I like or not? I'm not sure. They're competent, so they're not upsetting me or angering me. Sometimes their attitudes are explicitly bad. Sometimes they're refreshingly good. So it's really hard to say. I have to go beyond 3 episodes to really tell you how I feel, because I felt it had a pretty good first episode. Actually, you probably don't want to only watch the first episode, because the second episode was pretty good too. So it's a 2-episode starter, and all that setup was actually pretty good and interesting. Like, basically how I describe the main character. My description of the main character kind of embodies what makes those first 2 episodes work. And in episode 3, usually the 3-episode thing is about saying, okay, well, you got your setup in the first episode or your first 2 episodes, but maybe you don't know what that means, what kind of series it's going to be from then forward. But Episode 3 is another setup episode, I think, and so it's kind of hard to tell. It doesn't feel like it disappointed. If anything, there are just little character traits from some people that just kind of have me going, eh? But then those same characters are like, oh, but yeah, that's fine, whatever. Sorry, I've got the hiccups all of a sudden. So, overall, I've enjoyed the 3 episodes. I'm probably going to continue watching it because it feels like it's a little bit easier to just kind of throw that on. But feels is a very subjective experience, of course. And then the last thing on my notes here is Reincarnated as a Sword, Season 1, Episode 10. Which I think is right. I mean, I guess I didn't double check to see what episodes are there, but whatever the latest episode of Reincarnated as a Sword was. I mentioned before that the previous episode set up something that's really important for us to see, which is, you know, again, our story is interesting as long as it's not, oh yes, our main character is just so overpowered and that's all we have going for us. It's how do you deal with that overpoweredness? And one of the important things Reincarnated as a Sword has done is a proper job of sharing that. I'd say even better so than Reincarnated as a Slime, which you could almost argue does that in a certain way, where our main character does continue to be awesome kick-ass, but then, like, because of the way he's building up his village, some of his awesome kick-assness is kind of held by the other allies he makes until certain key moments where his awesomeness has to be kind of reestablished. And that works fine, but at the same time, it does mean that you kind of feel like you are putting the actual badassery a little bit on hold here and there, and the pacing doesn't feel too bad in that regard for Reincarnated as a Slime, which is why that one continues to be good. For Reincarnated as a Sword, the main problem is, since our main character is a sword who's supposed to be more or less, I say more or less, but it's not quite exactly. He's not exactly lacking in self-autonomy, but as a sword, he kind of understands a desire to be wielded by somebody to a certain degree. And again, when you set that up, then the important thing about the show is whether or not you like that character and our interaction between our 2 main characters, and you don't want to be our character just being a complete fucking badass and then making this person who's not a badass, you know, just kind of go along for the ride. And the show has done a good job of juggling that. I'd probably say this every single week because it's probably the main point of contention on whether or not this show stays interesting is whether or not they do a good enough job of keeping those characters balanced. And the previous episode did show some stuff, or maybe it was the episode just prior to that, did show some good stuff where it's like we get some good insight into why this show isn't just awesome because our main character happens to be a badass sword. But then the setup for this episode that I watched was maybe even a further test of that, and it's kind of good because it means that the show is successfully keeping our characters engaged while also defining them as a badass. Because, you know, if they're just a badass and they just completely clear everything without problem, then it isn't necessarily interesting. Like, you have to make it where it's interesting somehow. And something like Overlord makes that work by making it where it's not our main character's kick-ass badassery that's interesting. It's pretty much how the world around them is reacting to, discovering, changing to, kowtowing to, how it's moving forward with with that overwhelming of presence. And that's why Overlord, I think, works. Is because it really isn't about, oh, our main character's going to see it. It's, okay, how is the rest of the world going to handle this? How are they going to react to this? And so getting back to Reincarnated as a Sword, there could be elements of it where it's sort of like that. And that does seem to be a little thread that's in there that does also keep it interesting. But at the same time, I feel like it's doing a good job. Again, I really love Fran. I think Mr. Sword, the Sensei, he's got a great person. I don't know that she's necessarily the most kick-ass sword. Maybe he could choose somebody else who's already good at a sword, and then they become even better, and maybe they kick even more butt. But the personal connection between the two of them is great, and her wielding of that power is fun, in my opinion. Like, okay, yeah, she makes some mistakes where it's like, oh no, you should listen to other people when they say something, but at the same time, she's kind of in her own world in a fun way, I feel. And maybe other people really hate that. Most of that stuff I don't think applies to episode 10 here, where we got to see that stuff, and I think it resolved in a way that's fairly good. I don't think it completely resolved everything. It may be I wonder if this was an 11 episode core, and the next episode is what wraps up this core, or this season if this is the entire season. I don't know, but I am definitely kind of curious. Let's see. That's pretty much all the anime I watched. I do know that on my radar there's Is It Wrong to Pick Up Girls in a Dungeon Season 4? Again, I really like Season 3. I think Season 3 maybe didn't have the best rating out there, but I still thought it was really good. Again, a lot of my compliments for Season 3 were that I felt like it drew out the best in characters that needed to have stuff drawn out. You really feel like Belle really is a hero of heroes. You really feel like Hestia in the first season, she's a goddess, and maybe she feels like she kind of has goddess connections, but I feel like in season 3 she really shone as a goddess, and you really felt like, thank fucking God you're here. And there's a lot of other good elements to that season. Just the way certain characters react to certain trope setups, which are like, oh yes, in other series this would happen, but in this one, again, you feel very interesting, different flow. And that's definitely got me curious for where season 4 goes, where I don't expect to necessarily continue the same specific things that season 3 had, because I don't know that that's the way this series tends to work, but I do want to know where it goes from season 3. So I've been interested, and I see that all the dubbed episodes came out as of either last week or the week before, so I can't start watching, but I haven't, and I think it's mostly because video games are still a strong thing. Although before I get to video games, other stuff I've watched, non-anime. So I watched 2 Christmas movies with my Twitch friend Moth. I guess technically it was yesterday. And the first one's interesting because I'd never seen it before. It was The Polar Express, the movie where Tom Hanks plays like half the voices, and the CGI is kind of in this weird uncanny valley territory, and I actually kind of felt that the whole time. And then some of the actions it chose to have, because the original book wasn't kind of long enough content-wise to be made into a movie, so they added more stuff to it. They're kind of worrisome and concerned. I kind of went through that entire movie just going, well, I guess if I use child logic and ignore what they actually said there in the tone of voice, and we aren't dealing with a serial killing supernatural entity, but it sure gave lots of disturbing vibes along the way of stuff in there where it conveniently forgot, okay, they found this one person there, how did he follow them? They would have seen what? And not a bad movie, but definitely one that's amusing because of just how much it kind of disturbed me as I watched it. And a touching ending. If you know the ending to the book, I think that's kind of the general idea of the ending to the movie as well. So overall, a good movie. Definitely with its interesting flaws, but not the sort of thing that I would say, oh, don't watch it on Christmas. Nah, if you want a movie that feels like Christmas, you're definitely better off than going with Die Hard. Which isn't to say that you wouldn't have a better movie. Die Hard, I would argue, is a better movie. But, when you watch Die Hard, you don't walk away from that with that Christmas feeling. And so in that regard, Polar Express is definitely something you should watch every Christmas, if that's a movie that you like. The other one was Home Alone. And Jesus fucking Christ, every McAllister is an asshole. Our main character, every member of his family, some of them are worse than others. Fuck that uncle. But otherwise, it's a classic movie. Kind of fun. It's very interesting how much it feels like there's a legitimacy to the danger and activities of the wet bandits. Whereas I know that, like, there's also this kind of comical kids movie sort of element to it. But it doesn't feel like it dominates it as much as, like, Home Alone 3. Home Alone 2, I don't remember it dominating in there, but that one is a weird movie. No, I don't think that one exactly retreads Home Alone 1, but I do feel like there are a lot of things that are retread. And yeah, I don't know. If I do happen to watch that, then I will have my full opinions on that, hopefully, having more recently rewatched Home Alone. But I don't feel like I felt any different. Okay, I did feel one thing different with Home Alone this time, and that's those mirror neurons empathizing with the pain that the traps impose. Felt worse this time than usual, on the level of The Good Dinosaur. Like I mentioned, one of the big problems with that movie is that I was shuddering so much, my tailbone was like, oh god, that would have hurt. And yeah, that movie is, Good Dinosaur is kind of painful in that regard. And I feel like Home Alone has felt worse in that regard than ever. Even though I'm potentially more able to watch the nail scene than before. Although, that said, this time I still just instinctively closed my eyes. And I didn't even think about it. I wasn't even planning about it. It just sort of was about to happen and I closed, and it's just like, oh god, my brain's on autopilot. I've watched this movie so many times. Fun stuff. Other stuff, so video game wise, I guess Pokemon, I could just continue to kind of build up raid Pokemon. I don't remember at the time, and I think that shows up right here. You can kind of see that I've got my old Nintendo Switch on a phone carrying case plugged in like this. And this is because if I play it on my my computer display there while I'm playing the other Pokemon on the big TV, then that pretty much leaves this little piece of shit here. My laptop? That's off screen. Oh, I didn't even know I could do that. So my laptop for communications and other stuff, and it barely functions for some of that stuff as it is. So for me, when I'm doing the two games joining each other on a raid, I kind of like this to be there, and since I'm doing that more and more, because I'm keeping like 6 stars and 7 stars cleared, I've just had that sort of setup going on. Sorry, I'm yawning, trying to think if there's anything else to mention there, other than, okay, we know what the upcoming event Pokemon generally look like. We don't know the specific details. I think we're all curious. The next 7-star is Cinderace. So if you missed out on Charizard, unfortunately you missed out on Charizard. If you still want a Charizard, you can get somebody to breed a Charmander for you, thankfully. If you wanted a Charizard the mightiest, that's probably a bigger ask, and you may not find as many people willing to give that up. Or you'll have hackers out there that do it for you. But the next 7-star is Cinderace, and that will be New Year's weekend. Kind of curious what we're going to do for that. I think we've got some ideas. But ultimately, so for Charizard, I think people knew immediately Azumarill was kind of a go-to. Oh yeah, this will probably be a good Pokemon. And Azumarill's kind of shaky. I think Azumarill does its best if it's getting support. Otherwise, it becomes highly dependent on other Pokemon that were determined to be better for it. Grimmsnarl was identified as a good support mon, and so Grimmsnarl can support Azumarill pretty well. But then I think people, after the first Charizard came out, started figuring out Sylveon and Fluttermane are really where to go. And they both basically use the same set, but Fluttermane does it better than Sylveon. The problem is, for this upcoming Pokemon, for Cinderace, so Fluttermane worked because Charizard was a huge special attacking monster. Well, more like a moderately big special attacker. He has some okay physical attacking stats, and so there was a possibility he could have some of those, but they apparently chose not to do that. But I think there's no question for Cinderace. He doesn't have anything in regards to usable special attack, so everything he's going to have is physical attack. And unfortunately, the sorts of things that Fluttermane can resist very easily on Charizard, can't be as easily resisted for Cinderace because Fluttermane has a non-existent physical defense stat. Now that said, it is also possible that not Fido, but its evolved form, Dachshund, I think it was. Dachshund may actually be a good Pokemon for Cinderace as well. I say maybe because people have acknowledged what kinds of counters exist, and Cinderace does have some dangerous possibilities. And so we're going to have to actually see what Cinderace has when he comes out. One Pokemon that may be good for dealing with Cinderace is Armarouge. And it's possible that may be good even if there are certain moves out there that Cinderace knows that could be problematic. I think Sucker Punch is one that people are worried. If he knows Sucker Punch, then some of the counter ideas people have had would get absolutely obliterated. But maybe not Dachshund, because Dachshund would resist Dark. Instead, Dachshund worries about whether or not he's running Iron Head. But you put those aside. If he's running Sucker Punch, Armarouge can actually deal with that by setting up Psychic Terrain. And if Armarouge does that, then they get to start attacking with a Psychic attack that's super effective against their fighting weakness, which becomes more powerful under Psychic Terrain. So there's a kind of multiplicative effect going on there, which is a good thing in Pokemon. in these raid battles, you want the multiplicative effects if you can help it. But yeah, beyond that, I'm not sure. Like, Iron Moth may actually be able to be decent. Resistance to fire and fighting, which we know he has, so it really depends on what he has. But the main problem with Iron Moth is, again, it's more of a specially defensive Pokemon. But one of the advantages of it is if it does have stuff to counter the opponent's physical offense, or to lessen it and make it not an issue, then Iron Moth is actually kind of a pretty nice Pokemon. It can lower the opponent's special defense stat, but unlike something like Fluttermane or Sylveon, which it can only do that when the shield is down, and can't do anything about that if they then reset their stats afterwards, not only does Iron Moth build that special defense drop off even if the shield comes up and its stats are cleared, but since that also counts as an attack, it also means that it can terrastalize a lot earlier if there's any reason that you wouldn't do that. Sometimes there could be reasons not to. For example, well, I don't know if that's a good example. I guess the example here would be if you wanted to maintain a fire resistance. Fair story. So, guess we'll have to see. Lots of interesting stuff. Lots of things to think about. Unfortunately for me, Pokemon wasn't the only thing to play, so that's probably why I wasn't quite sure, because it feels like this list of anime I've watched is bigger than before, but it feels like I've played more video games as well, so it feels a little bit like those are contradictions in terms. I haven't had enough PTO in order for that to make that big of a difference, I thought. But I did, Dead by Daylight, I did finally complete the page, although I was frustrated a whole lot of it. Dead by Daylight can be a very frustration-inducing game, but I've got all my event cosmetics, and I just have 2 more levels to go in the Rift before I get the Deep Rift items, the remaining 2 Deep Rift items, and so I'll either do that or I'll eventually just spend $2 and just complete the Rift. I think that's how much it would be. Nothing too bad. So I'm not too worried, so that's taking backseat priority to other stuff that's going on. So, for example, Phasmophobia also had a Christmas update, and I was initially actually pretty disheartened by it, because I was joining my, I was joining Moth, my Twitch friend, for that, and eventually I reached a point where it just sort of felt like, I don't know, like the creators of the game had maybe made it too complicated and too esoteric and difficult, and it was at a point where it's just like, I don't know, I feel like they're trying to keep it difficult for the people who already know the game, and instead of creating something that people can chill, so it's kind of, I felt like it was maybe starting to lose its appeal to more casual players. But I then over the last 24 hours I've been playing Phasmophobia just on my own in intermediate mode to unlock the Christmas stuff on my own, and it surprisingly went a little bit better. And I've been doing another thing, which is getting me some of the lost money, because I went into there with old money from when it was easier to get it, so I had all the equipment, and then we could just bring it all, and all I had to do was be careful about not dying, and usually I was able to do that pretty well. I was able to evaluate, okay, this ghost is starting to get closer to a potential hunt. But no, I died twice in a row to what felt like the ghost going from 0 to 100, like somebody messed with a cursed object, but the people didn't mess with the cursed object. It was just, I don't know, disheartening. You just lose so much money in the game, and you don't get it back very quick. So this is an experiment to see if I can get some of it back enough to maybe feel like, okay, I can continue to play that way, or maybe I'm going to insist that we start playing a different way, where we only bring the equipment that we absolutely need. Would probably be a better way to play. But I also enjoy bringing all the items just so that other people can just play more casually. I like the casual playing. Oh well. Maybe there's other ways we can explore how to do this. Maybe there's stuff we can do in the custom modes that make it where we can control some of that stuff better. I don't know. I haven't thought about experimenting that until I just started talking about it right now. But, you know, I've gotten the Christmas trophy, so at this point it was mostly an exploration of completing my collectibles, my other collectibles, other than the custom mode difficulty ones that exist, I think still exist out there. Excuse me. Jesus. Okay. Yeah, I guess my brain is starting to drift. I know we're getting closer to the end of the year. Chances are something these next 2 weeks is not going to arrive in time, because we have Christmas and New Year's happening at just the right periods of time. But, you know, if that happens, I will instead do a tour of the apartment. And if there's 2 days in a row like that, which would kind of surprise me, I guess. Maybe it shouldn't. But if there were 2 days in a row like that for some reason, then maybe I'd do a cooking video. I know some people have said, hey, more cooking videos. I have to definitely take a look to see what I've made, just to make sure I don't duplicate something there. I don't know. Things to find out. But yeah, I'm definitely reaching exhausted levels. So y'all, have a nice week.